This episode is brought to you by Zarzar Law. I'm investigative journalist Molly Barrows. For years, I've covered the stories that made headlines in Northwest Florida and all along the Gulf Coast. Murders, missing persons, and mysteries of all kinds. These cases are far from over for many victims because the full story has yet to surface. Join me for Gulf Coast Confidential, where I dive into the saltier side of the South and expose the lies, greed, and corruption that often weighs down the truth. It's time to turn the tide and get a shot at justice. Hey y'all, I'm Molly Barrows, and we welcome you to the Gulf Coast Confidential podcast, where if you follow along, you know we cover some of the most scandalous crimes and cases that bubble up right here in Northwest Florida, and we do get some doozies around here.
We do.
We absolutely do, but we also cover a lot of cases that are doozies that are not from around here, and we do have a doozy for you today. This one's called Head-On Killer Jeanine Jaramillo. We're going to get into details on that case in just a second, but before we do want to ask you to please like and subscribe. I think you know how to do it. Hopefully, if you don't, then that's all right. But those little buttons that say like and subscribe, we would just love it if you would click those.
Jeff.
But in the meantime, if you're not familiar with the show, I'm Molly Barrows, longtime reporter here on the Gulf Coast Confidential podcast, as well as just on the Gulf Coast. And Pam Hill, pharmacist and victims advocate, has experienced violent crime in her own family. So together we sort of join forces, if you will, and talk about these what the feezy cases that pop up.
Unbelievable sometimes.
Yes, they absolutely are. And today we have a theme talking about kidnapping. Like I mentioned, today's episode is called Head-On Killer Jeanine Jaramillo. It's about a woman in New Mexico who was recently sentenced after she was convicted of first-degree murder and the deaths of a retired Las Vegas firefighter as well as a Santa Fe Police Department officer. They were chasing her, the officer was anyway, when she was speeding at least 80 miles an hour down a freeway in New Mexico going the wrong way, y'all. Her defense was that she wasn't alone in the car, but she had been kidnapped at knife point by her ex-boyfriend. Kind of a crazy excuse, and they fairly easily debunked it. But y'all, apparently you do what works for you, as Pam likes to say.
Right.
And she had used this excuse about being kidnapped before. So before we get into details of this extremely sad but interesting case, because I think it's kind of like the profile of a narcissist, really, in some ways,
definitely.
in my opinion.
Yeah. A liar, almost like John Lovitz on Saturday Night Live when he's like, yeah, that's the ticket. I mean, they just lie about anything. Or Jim Carrey in Liar, Liar. And you know how I like to say, they will climb a tree to tell a lie, then stand on the ground and tell the truth.
Girl, that is the truth.
This is what this lady does.
Well, and in keeping with that theme, we've got some other cases we want to talk about in our Hold My Milo Sweet Tea moment.
That's right.
Yes. Oh, my goodness. And so these other cases also deal with false accusations of kidnapping and also include other liars. The first is Carlee Russell. Now, this gal is from Pam's neck of the woods. This case happened around the Birmingham area in Alabama. And, you know, we all watch the news. We all care when somebody claims that they've seen a crime or they've been kidnapped. And I think for the most part, people want to do the right thing. So when they hear about a crime or a kidnapping, whether it's human trafficking or just perhaps a parent that's absconded with a child, people are like, oh my gosh, what can I do to help? Is this in my neighborhood? Can I keep an eye out? You know, so this girl really tapped into people's heartstrings when she claimed that she had seen a toddler on the side of the road, basically. And she said she was going to stop. She called 911 and claimed she had seen this child and was going to stop to help this child. The next thing you know, she had, quote unquote, disappeared.
Right. It was over near the area of the Galleria in Birmingham, near Hoover. And it was I-459, which is one of the interstates that connects like from Tuscaloosa back up to Birmingham and where all the good places are up there, the Summit and everything.
Good shopping, good eating.
Definitely deaf. And so she is on the interstate there, and she had gotten off work. I don't want to tell all of it yet because we're going to do this story in toto later.
This is just an update because we want you to know we're watching these cases, this one and another one we're going to tease before we get to the main one. But yeah, so this is a fascinating case, Carlee Russell.
Definitely. And she told some big old lies and got herself in big old trouble, did the per usual thing when people are fixing to do a crime. They're like, how much does an Amber Alert cost?
Oh,
or
my gosh.
how much is a one-way bus ticket from Birmingham? So it's something sort of like that. And then all the little, it was almost like a Gone Girl and snacks and things she bought at Target and all kind of stuff. So if you know this story a little bit, there's a wig involved, some Cheez-Its, some granola bars, and playing with her hair.
Yeah, I tell you what, if there's anything that I have learned from watching crime shows, including our own, it's your Google history can be used against you.
I know it. I was looking something up the other day and I was like, don't do anything stupid.
I know. I was having a conversation with a friend the other day and, we all get busy. You're trying to say one thing, but your mind's somewhere else. And I was talking to this woman and I was like, I was hanging out with some of my adult friends. And I'm like, well, all my friends are adults. I was like, I also have minor friends. And then I thought, well, my God, I'm really just digging a hole for myself. Like, I don't really hang out with minors.
Stop.
Right. So yeah, that's what I think about too when I Google some of these things for work, because sometimes you're researching pretty heinous crimes.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And speaking of heinous crimes, I've been following the P. Diddy trial. And I'm learning things that I'm like, I've never heard of that. Let me Google it. I'm like, maybe I should not Google that.
Yes, maybe back that one up. Don't do that. I do know people have been Googling baby oil like crazy.
Oh my gosh. Well, and who knew you could buy such large amounts?
I know. They were like Costco, I think.
Oh my gosh. Maybe they've lost quite the clientele, I guess, with Diddy being in prison.
It's unbelievable. It is just like, sometimes you say stuff's unbelievable, but this is unbelievable.
It really is. Like I said, I thought that I'd heard most everything and I couldn't be surprised, but things that happened have surprised me. This guy just seemed to feel like he was never going to be held accountable for anything. And I know we say that so many times with so many of these accused criminals, convicted criminals, people who are charged with all sorts of heinous crimes. And that's certainly what he's facing,
Definitely.
Extortion, sex trafficking. But the circumstances, while the motives may be exactly the same as a lot of these cases we cover, he was certainly creative in how he went about. He had the money, the influence, the power, and to basically surround himself with protection to keep doing what he was doing, and he hurt so many people. Those were the accusations.
Oh, yeah. Dehumanizing people. That's the part there. I mean, I don't care how much money you have or whatever, but it's so sad to me that you can sign other people up to help you do this stuff.
Oh, I know. And the heartbreak, the shame, and the embarrassment that comes along with so many of these folks who participated in these wild parties that he had or these sex orgies. And I mean, some of them were underage. Some of them went along willingly because, his ex-girlfriend, the one that really started all of this by openly talking about what he had done, Ventura, she talked about how she just wanted to go ahead and come forward because it was affecting her life. And she initially started dating him believing that she was in love and wanted to participate in some of these adventures, if you will, these sexual escapades. But it was pretty bad. Anyway, so he's claiming innocence in all of this and denying it, and he's on trial and didn't mean to go down the Diddy road, but it was
well, you can't help it right now. It's everywhere.
It is everywhere. Well, and I tell you what was everywhere for a long time too is this other case, speaking of kidnapping, this gal Hannah Kobayashi, how do you say her last name?
Kobayashi is
Kobayashi. Yeah, 30 years old, photographer from Maui, Hawaii. You folks may have heard of this, but she went missing after missing a connecting flight in Los Angeles. This was last year, November of last year. She was traveling to New York. And people thought, well, my God, was she kidnapped? What happened to this lady? And then it turns out that she was found safe and sound. So, we'll talk a little bit more detail about that as well. But, here's yet another woman who claimed in a roundabout way that something awful had happened to her. And it turned out that was not the case at all.
Right. She just voluntarily disappeared. And as a grown-up, we can do that. But that's kind of selfish to not tell your people or your family. And her dad stayed so worried. And this story has a very sad ending, but not for her, but for her dad.
Oh, my goodness. So I am not as familiar with this case. I do remember when it made headlines, though. So she just disappeared on her own. She never claimed that she had been kidnapped. People just assumed that she had because she couldn't be reached.
Yeah, there was some cryptic text and stuff, too. So we'll get into all that because it is quite the mess.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to it. But now back to our main story. This is another one that's just so interesting to me. Again, not because she did something horrible, but the type of person that does this sort of thing. We all make mistakes. I know I've mentioned before, I have a little bit of a lead foot. I speed. I think really I just never really want to be in the car. So I'm like, let me just hurry up and get to where I'm going so I don't have to be in the car anymore. But I don't know what Janine Jaramillo's excuse was, but this lady had a repeated history of claiming kidnapping, causing chaos. And it finally came to a head, and there was no escaping the consequences of this when she was basically going 80 miles an hour in a deadly wrong way crash on I-25 near Santa Fe. And all her crimes in the past, whatever she may have done karma-wise, it all caught up with her in this case. She tried to use the same excuses that she had in previous incidents, that her ex-boyfriend had kidnapped her at knife point, doused her with gasoline, forced her into the car. And I guess some people feel like they can just beat you over the head with their BS, with their lies. And I imagine that does work in some cases in your personal life. People probably just get tired and don't want to deal with you. But the prosecutors in this case and the police in this case, especially since she killed a police officer and killed a retired firefighter, they were like, the buck stops here, lady. We got your number.
Oh, yeah. Well, she kind of told on herself, too. This is who we're dealing with, Janine Jaramillo, and she uses all the loudness and the I'm a woman that's, beat down and everybody's taking advantage of me, this boyfriend, that boyfriend, you, me, and then she's trying to use her feminine wiles, which are way out of whack, with the police and other people like this. What had happened was Janine Jaramillo was in the car with her boyfriend. His name was Jerry Chavez. And so she had pulled up in front of a man named Richard in a parking lot. She got at him like a perpendicular where he couldn't get out. And she had told her boyfriend, get out of my car. And he wouldn't. And by the way, the car's stolen too.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So
did she steal the car or did he?
I don't know who stole it, but
it was a stolen car and she was in it. Okay.
Not the man they talking to, Mr. Richard. She said, hey, help me. He's kidnapped me. Call 911. And he was sitting over there with like a little bat, in his hand.
Richard was?
No. Richard's the guy she's talking to.
Right. I just want to know who had the bat.
Oh, her boyfriend in the car. She's saying, he's beating me, back with this normal stuff. Oh, my gosh. So she drives off then. So he calls 911. She sets this up, calls 911. Well, at a certain point, Janine and her boyfriend get in a fight, and he finally gets out of the car. And so she just keeps going. So this is what happened. She's going, and she said she loves speed. It's fun. She said, I do this because this is fun.
This is a lot like another episode that we covered where that kid enjoyed speed, said he was addicted to it, and ended up crashing into a minivan or a van in Seattle and killed a mom and several children.
Right. Chase Jones did that. And then we got this lady here who's had shoplifting and 3 of these other kidnapping and hoaxes. She stole a bucket truck in her neighborhood and hijacked that somewhere. They found it on the side of the road.
Did she use the bucket part of it by any chance?
I don't think so. I don't think she did.
Interesting. I mean, that's a random thing to steal.
Yeah. She doesn't care. She doesn't care.
Wow.
So she stole that, and they found it on the side of the road. That case gets dismissed. She always gets either just a little bit of time or the case dismissed. Then she had stolen a blue car before, and she said, I didn't steal this. They have her on camera at the dealership walking in front of it. And that was another kidnapping hoax that she had with the same thing. She always says the person in the car with her, she makes this person up. His name is Mark Lopez, and he has on a red shirt, black pants, and a black jacket.
Every time?
Every time. That's what she says. So Mark Lopez. So, she's being chased by the police. They're trying to help her.
Is this almost like a fantasy of hers, do you
I don't know
I
what it
wonder
is.
why you would keep repeating the same lie. Is it an attention-seeking
Yes,
behavior?
she's a sociopath. She's just not right. But so these police are coming after her. They think they have a kidnapping in progress.
Oh my gosh.
So they're in hot pursuit to help her. So they're following her, and she gets on the wrong side of the interstate on I-25. And she's just going as fast as she can. And there's like several of the policemen following behind her. And they said that's one of the highest priorities, a kidnapping in progress.
Yes.
So they're taking a risk by going that way, but some of them are riding down the highway by her, and some are following behind her. Okay, so they're going that way. She's missing things. She's doing U-turns. She's accelerating. She's doing everything. She's not stopping. So what happens is the trooper or the policeman right behind her He's real close to her. The oncoming traffic's coming this way. She sees the oncoming traffic. She jumps out of the way. The oncoming traffic here was the retired firefighter, Mr. Frank Lovato. The person right behind her was the police, and that was Mr. Duran. And those two hit each other, and they got killed.
Oh, that just hurts my heart. That's awful.
It is. And then she goes down the road a little bit, gets out of her car and starts all kind of chaos and running. The police are going, get here, get back this way. So she's coming back to them and starting talking and all kind of stuff, just jibber jabber. They said, get here. And she kept saying, he's gone, he's gone. He went that way. She has made this Mark Lopez person up and said he was driving and he got out and ran. And so they're thinking there's another person there. They got her sitting in the car and she was the one driving.
Good Lord. So how long did it take before they realized she was lying?
Well, what had happened too on there, they didn't find anybody else there. They went and looked at the car. Stuff was in the passenger seat. She couldn't have been sitting there. She said she was in the floorboard. There's no way that could have happened. And then they found...
I'll say, I mean, not to pass judgment, but she's kind of a bigger lady.
Yeah.
I mean, a child would have a hard time being on the floorboard, much less this gal.
Yeah, oh yeah. She said, I was all over the car. She just won't stop talking, and she just keeps talking over them, and they're trying to protect her. And she gets all in and out of the car and just keeps so much chaos going. So they found the keys to the car in the back seat where she was, in the police car.
Oh,
So
wow.
she was driving. She even got to the point where she said, this is y'all's fault because y'all should have stopped that hot pursuit on me. I know y'all broke protocol, and I'll be dang if they didn't.
Well, I did wonder about that before I realized that she had claimed to be kidnapped. I thought maybe she just was drunk or high or didn't care and just was, on a suicide mission and driving the wrong way down the freeway. And I thought, well, why would they chase her to stop it? Because in the crimes that I've covered locally, basically law enforcement, like unless a kidnapping is involved, to your point, if it's just simply a high-speed chase, they're told to back off at a certain point because it could cause a deadly accident. Somebody might lose control or hurt someone else, which sadly and tragically is what happened in this case. But it makes more sense that they thought she was a kidnapped victim. Sounds like she's just a complete lunatic who's desperate for attention. And it had worked for her before, so she thought, well, why not?
Right. And it's worked for her, and she didn't get in too much trouble either. When she had stolen the blue car, they had told her to stop. They had to throw the spikes out, And when she did this hit and run type thing here, or hit people or, barely miss, they had to close the schools down, the roads down. I mean, she just created all this chaos because she was smart enough to know, well, if I'm not driving, they can't get on to me,
Wow.
Staying in hot pursuit of me, going up exit ramps, going about 80 to 90 miles an hour, no regard for anybody else on the highway at all.
Well, that is absolutely horrible. I can't even imagine the families of those victims that were involved, and especially the law enforcement officer just doing his job. And then to think, here he is risking his life to save someone who is claiming to have their life in danger. And yet there she was endangering all of them and took him for no good reason. That's how I would feel. And, I'd like to take this moment before we talk a little bit more about this case, since we are talking about deadly car accidents. We want to thank the Zarzar Law Firm for being an advertiser on the show and supporting Gulf Coast Confidential. We do take the viewpoint of victims, and that's something that Joe Zarzar does as well. He's a personal injury attorney in the Pensacola area, practices all around the Panhandle, and handles some of the biggest cases, medical malpractice, different types of personal injury cases around the state and across the Southeast. And in fact, he's got some of the biggest ones right now, including Dr. Shiknowski. He's got a personal injury suit against him, wrongful death for removing Mr. Bryan's liver by mistake instead of his spleen. We've mentioned that several times. We've got a couple of episodes on that. But, he also handles personal injury when it comes to car accidents and liabilities. He said, reckless drivers hate Joe Zarzar. That's one of his slogans, because you do need somebody that's going to fight for you. If you've been injured through no fault of your own, you're hurt, and it impacts you physically, you can't work anymore, or you can't work or live your life like you used to. It's cost you enjoyment of your life. And sometimes insurance companies don't want to cooperate, or agencies that were involved whatever the case may be, if there's somebody who's responsible for what happened, you don't want someone that isn't going to fight for you. And the Zarzar Law Firm most certainly will fight for you. So I know that's who I would pick if I needed an attorney.
Same.
And we, again, appreciate the Zarzar Law Firm for their support of the show. So turning back now to Jaramillo. So chaos is her recipe, it sounds
Right.
like. This is what she enjoys doing. She probably thought, I don't know how she thought she was going to get out of that situation.
Well, because she's gotten out of them before, just creating chaos, and then she plays on people's emotions too. She said Mark Lopez, the invisible Mark Lopez in a red shirt.
Well, and super duper fast as
Yeah.
well, can we
Oh,
say?
yeah.
Not just behind the wheel of a car, allegedly, but like to escape
Yeah.
a scene like that.
Right.
In this day and age, there are cameras everywhere.
Right.
And even if there aren't cameras, like security cameras or ring cameras or, highway cameras, then people have their phones.
Right.
I don't know how, that's what I mean. Like, I don't know how she thought how this could just continue on. But these selfish people, it's just like the gal who locked her ex-boyfriend in a suitcase and let him die.
Sarah Catherine Boone.
Yes, that
That
crazy.
Wait, she's
I know.
a resident crazy there.
I know. She's
Yeah.
like, well, it wasn't my fault. And
Yeah.
then there she is with video of him, and you can hear him, getting weaker and weaker, his voice tiny in the suitcase, just calling her name, Sarah, Sarah, let me out,
yeah.
let me out, And she's just like laughing and enjoying it, and then turns around and says, well, he abused me. It's not my fault.
Yeah.
Pass me or whatever, you know?
He could have got out.
Exactly. So to me, she strikes me, Janine, as having the same attitude.
Oh, she does. Well, she creates the extra chaos because Mark Lopez, she said, had a knife, had a gun, poured gas on her. She's standing right there, no smell of gas on her sweater or no gas in the car.
I wondered about that too. That's
Yeah.
just such a crazy thing to say.
But people
And
are
no proof.
They're in the middle of this. I saw the wreck. Like you said,
Yes.
it's on body cam. I watched it. I held my breath, and I was just like, I could see the smoke and the chaos and through the cars. She was acting. Policemen, people that are working with the public, and most all of us operate in good faith. We don't say, you're a person with a tongue and a brain, you're going to lie to me.
Right.
There's some people that have that approach on people, but, as a rule, we don't do that,
Right.
especially when you're in one of the helping professions. And they were being so sweet to her, like, sit down, are you hurt? And she said, no, I don't know. And I'm just like, you are taking this ruse a bit too far, making a fool of these people. There are 2 first responders dead, and you made them hit each other. And then she's sitting in court telling the judge, it ain't my fault. She said, I wasn't in the wreck, and putting me away ain't going to help bring nobody back.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was researching the case and a little bit on the trial, and they brought in the forensic experts to weigh in on her claim that she was not the one driving. And basically the crime scene tech said, quote, initially when I was on scene and not seeing that airbag deployment for that front passenger, and from my scene brief, learning that supposedly there was someone in that front passenger seat and not seeing that airbag deployment, it didn't make sense. And that was Agent David Barella. So obviously these lies cannot hold water. They weren't going to hold up. Eventually she was going to be caught. But these folks with this, whatever it is, mental illness or this absolute just stubbornness to admit their responsibility and the truth, it's almost like they just cling desperately to this story and believe it themselves.
And it's not just pitiful. It's pathetic
Yes.
to watch that, and to think that you're sitting there and you're going to say that, and then they're usually disrespectful. There usually are the people with narcissistic tendencies. They deny, they turn around and accuse, they reverse the roles. I'm the victim, you're the offender.
Right.
And that's exactly what happens. It's almost cookbook. So Mark Lopez, she said she'd been dating him for a couple of months. I don't know his birthday. I don't know this, that, and the other. But, blaming all that on him. Well, when we're in court with the victim impact statements, the family of Mr. Duran and Mr. Lovato, they're like, she took their lives for nothing. Mr. Lovato was retired. He's just coming down the road the right way. And Mr. Duran, he cared more about her that day than she cared about herself, is what I believe his sister said. And they were like, she wrote a letter to them. And it was they call it a sorry, not sorry letter.
Janine's letter.
Yeah. And that's sort of like the thing like with Kristen Ketchup, that situation there with Tierra, where Rachel Drais is supposed to write a letter or what she learned or whatever. These mean nothing. they don't come from anywhere. So they just do it.
Yes, if you're not familiar with this case, it's a local Pensacola case, and we have an episode on it. But it's about a shooting at a bar called Mugs and Jugs that happened a couple of years ago. The main shooter, the suspect in that case, has not even gone to trial yet, and that's been frustrating for the victim's family. But this young woman was shot to death at least 7 times right there in the parking lot by this young man, Christian Ketchup, and his girlfriend. And his girlfriend beat this woman up. There was an altercation between both young women. It's unclear what started it, but the victim, Tiara, ended up on the ground. Rachel, on video, is seen jumping on her and beating her, sort of bending down and beating her, but then ends up on the ground. And then Ketchup just pulls a gun out of his the front of his pants and just empties his gun and hits her multiple times. So Deriz was just sentenced to misdemeanor battery. She was only charged with misdemeanor battery. And what Pam was saying, part of her sentence was to write a "What have I learned" letter. And we're trying to confirm if that's even been done, because that was supposed to have been done within 30 days of her going to jail. I reached out to the state attorney's office. They couldn't confirm it for me. I'm trying to get a hold of somebody at probation to see if they'll tell me, but they don't necessarily have to, because it's not, I don't think public record applies to them in the same way. But you normally find when it was court ordered to write this letter, and a lot of these punishments, when they are court ordered, you can find record of them in the clerk of court's files, and there's no record of it. So it's just crazy to think. But, you do want to hear what people's thoughts are. You do want to see them take responsibility. And it sounds like even in this letter, Janine Jaramillo was certainly not taking responsibility.
She didn't. She was sitting there spinning around. And I am so happy about this. She got Judge Mary Morrow Summer. She was the judge for Hannah Gutierrez with the Alec Baldwin shooting and the accidental shooting. This judge does not play. She was doing around, turning around and looking at her family and talking to them and being disrespectful during the other victim impact statements. And she's talking. She just talks. And the judge
is
just
all about her all the time. Right. It's the Janine show.
Right. And the judge is like, shut up, basically.
Good. Good.
So she said, I'm not a murderer. I didn't cause the accident. I'm not in the accident. And the judge said, a jury just spent 5 hours and said you are.
And saw the video.
Right.
I mean, the officer that died, he was going 90 miles an hour. They said that he was basically covering the length of a football field every second, trying to catch up with her to help her in his mind. And then she moves out of the way, almost like in a movie scene. And then he hits this poor firefighter head on. I mean, my heart breaks for both of them and their families. And I'm so glad that there was body cam. I mean, God, that hurts my heart to even think that they had to gather that and look at it and see, knowing what happened. But thank goodness they did have that evidence, because I think when jurors see that kind of thing in real life, when they get to see and almost be a part of it, really and truly, that video, they're almost right there in the car with him.
Right.
And then they see what happens. I think that had to have made an impression.
Oh, it did, because it was like when kids play cars or something, just slam them here, there, and everywhere. Cars were off on the side just trying to get out of the way. Some were getting clipped, and other people could have, got clipped like that too. But she's sitting in there during the victim impact statements, I don't like it when they turn around and talk to the family, when they're doing when they want to allocute to the judge. We don't want to talk to you. Look at the judge. That's who's there. I think that's so disrespectful. And the judge does too. Most judges do. And they're like, you don't speak to them. You speak to me. Because it's not their show anymore. She thought this was fun. She's sitting there with tears going down her face, still steady saying, it's the police's fault. She got her a new little tattoo in prison, a little cross right here. And then her boyfriend, who I call Papa Ponytail, Jerry Chavez, one at the beginning, Papa Ponytail's up there basically going, this has put a damper on our travel plans.
Good Lord.
They're just so devoid of any sense or anything.
Or compassion or empathy or just putting themselves in anyone else's shoes but their own.
Definitely. And then that's what he said. Then next comes, the police should have backed off. That was their fault. And he's up there, and finally the judge said, you're not going to keep saying that. You're going to shut up.
Can he not find another girlfriend? Is he just desperately trying to come up with anything to hang on to the one that he's got?
Yeah, I don't think... I think he probably wanted to be on court TV or something, because this lady over here, she's there with shark eyes, dead eyes, just acting a daggum fool still. But he had to get up there, and so she set him down too. So Judge Morrow, she told them, you are going to listen to me, because she wouldn't listen to the judge. And she said, you are going to listen to me.
Well, she certainly did when she was sentenced to 60 years in prison, which is essentially a life sentence for this woman.
Right. She got 2 of them. She got one for Robert and one for Frank. And she put at the end of it at least 30 years. And she said consecutively, not concurrently. So her little smartassness back to the judge got them linked right behind each other. You can't do that.
No, and I'm glad that the victims had a chance to share their thoughts on how it had impacted their lives, what she had done. Not that it'll make any difference to her, it sounds like, but she did cry. I mean, she really was putting on quite the show. I think, if she has any emotion at all, it's for herself, and she was certainly sorry. But now she's, I imagine, appealing this.
No, if she'll appeal it, but that's okay. We'll just do it again. But I don't know who she thinks she is, but she thought she was something because 10 or 11 times she'd gotten away with it before. So here we are.
Well, it'll be interesting to see, speaking of that, if the families of the victims look into that, like why wasn't she held accountable before? Why was it allowed to continue, really?
Yeah. I just think when you see somebody acting like this all the time, I like to get away from people that are acting like this. I really don't want them in my life. Maybe I'm just, I don't know what I am, but I can't take all that. I don't want it in my life.
I think that's very true. And I think, in my own personal life, I now recognize that anytime somebody's causing chaos or upset on a regular basis, sometimes things happen in life, things can't be helped. It's chaotic and and confusing. But any person that consistently brings chaos and confusion, I just say, get thee behind me, Satan.
That's right. Bye, girl. Bye, boy.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Pam, for joining us to talk about this. What a sad, sad case. And
it is sad.
I hope the family can pick up the pieces and move on, at least knowing that the killer is behind bars.
Definitely.
We thank you for joining us here on Gulf Coast Confidential. That is it for Head On Killer, Janine Jaramillo. This is our episode of Gulf Coast Confidential. I'm your host, writer, and producer, Molly Barrows, with co-host and researcher, Pam Hill. And a big thanks, as always, to our director, editor, and production engineer, man of many hats and talents, James Roy. And remember, you can listen to more of our Gulf Coast Confidential conversations wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, so many places. And you can always watch on the Gulf Coast Confidential YouTube channel. And we just ask you to like and subscribe. And we'll see you next time. This episode is brought to you by Zarzar Law.